And we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Victor Davila. I'm on the AIGA DEC Steering Committee, and on behalf of the whole team, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's, or today's, or this morning's AIGA DEC virtual events. The AIGA DEC, the Design Educators Community, is part of AIGA, the professional organization for design, and the DEC's mission is to enhance and support the abilities of design educators and educational institutions, whether K through 12, higher ed, or another kind of design program, to prepare future designers for excellence in design practice, design theory, and design writing, while supporting the fundamental mission of AIGA of furthering creative excellence. Just as an FYI, again, we will be recording this, and this will be on the DEC YouTube channel after the fact. So make sure that if you miss any parts of that, that you go check that out for us as well. And if you can make sure, if you are not being, if you're not on microphone while you're not being, while you're not on mic, if you can go ahead and mute your mics, we'd appreciate this. So there aren't any interruptions in the process. So we have a great panel today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a great panel, and we're going to be discussing AI, the practical uses of AI in the classroom, which is something that I think is in a lot of our minds. So I'm going to ask the panelists to quickly introduce themselves before we get started with the presentations. So I'll call on them one by one. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself, I would appreciate it. So we can start with Lishan.
All right. Thank you, Victor. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know it's Friday afternoon for most of us and evening for some folks in Europe. My name is Huang. I am actually a full-time staff member here at AIGA. I'm the Senior Director of Learning and Programs, but I'm also an educator. I am an adjunct at the School of Visual Arts, at Parsons and at Emerson. I teach different places, different semesters, not all at once. And I come from a background working in design agencies in New York. Previously started the design practice at an agency called Purpose in New York before starting my own studio called Fusa with my partner, who's also my husband. But we are now, focused on other things right now, as well as teaching. So that is me.
Thank you, Lishan. Leslie.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Leslie Parker. I worked in the industry until about 2015 when I transitioned to teaching. So I'm now in my 9th year as assistant professor of graphic design at Arkansas State University.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And joining us from Rome, Italy, Sana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sana. I'm an assistant professor at San Francisco State University. I began my design career in advertising, and then during 2020, I just became an academic, and since then, I've been teaching in visual design.
Thank you so much. And Tony.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Jones. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. For many years, I was at McCann Erickson. I was a SVP creative director for in the advertising world, like Sana as well. And but most recently, I'm teaching at Pratt Institute. I teach the AI Design Certificate course. So that means that AI is actually what we're teaching, in addition to using it in our classroom. So it's very exciting. I also have a company called Creative AI Academy, in which I do corporate training for agencies and companies to learn how to use generative AI in their workflows. So I'm looking forward to talking to all of you and meeting the rest of the panel as we hear their stories. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you all for joining us. So we'll go ahead and start with Lishan. Lishan, if you can go ahead and give us a little bit of insight as to how you use AI in your day-to-day curriculum.
All right. Thanks again, Victor. I'm going to focus on a class that I taught at SVA last year. I haven't really used AI in my Parsons or Emerson classes yet, but at SVA, I teach a class called Technologies for Designing Change. It's a 2-semester class, or it's technically 3 quarters, so it's in the fall and in the spring. The other thing worth mentioning is that it's hybrid, because I live in Providence, Rhode Island now. The students are mostly in person in New York City, and so we meet on Zoom, and then once a month I was meeting them in person for a full-day studio. The other context that's worth talking about, I want to talk a little bit about the context of the program, the class, the students. I have some I made a list to talk about things, and then I'll give an example of a specific assignment that I gave the students. So in this program, it's an MFA program. There are usually about 20 students per cohort, and it's a single track cohort. So all the students are together for all of their classes. And the other thing worth noting is that this program, like a lot of the master's programs at SVA, are majority international student. The vast majority of the students come from East Asia. China is probably the biggest one, but also Taiwan, South Korea, as well as India, other places. But I would say the majority of the students are English language learners or from countries where English is not their primary or first language. The program itself is an MFA in design for social innovation. So we don't have a lot of focus on specific tools or craft. It really is looking at concepts, at design ethics, critical thinking, community engagement, and understanding social systems. And so let's see, what else is worth noting about this? Okay, so I'll get into my list, and this connects to who the students are and meeting them where they are. So the first point I wanted to make is that AI for my students is a form of assistive technology that they're already using, regardless of what I do. And so because so many of them are English language learners, they obviously have to get a passing score on their TOEFL to get here, but some of them are quite young. They're straight out of undergrad. They've just left China for the first time. And obviously there's a gap between being able to pass an English language proficiency exam and then just following classes in English all day, every day with a fast-talking New Yorker professor. And so we found that on Zoom, for example, the students will request the closed captioning and the speech-to-text stuff. The university as a whole gives the students access to Grammarly, which is like kind of spell check on steroids and grammar check. So that there's already this use of that. And I think it's the students themselves kind of make that jump, which is not a very far one, to using large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, whichever tools they want to help them with, say, just scripting what they want to say, outlining what they want to say as that kind of assistive tech. Beyond that, there's obviously the second point is AI as an extension of existing tools that we use all the time. So I was just Googling something before the session, and I started noticing like the AI overview, right? So it just shows up at the top before your regular search results. Or earlier this week, I took a picture of a cat in my neighborhood, and before I posted it online, I saw like there's some like debris on the sidewalk, and it just looked ugly. So I used an AI feature in Lightroom on my phone to just get rid of that, to make it prettier, right? So these are things that we're using every day. And I bring this up because I think it's a reminder to move beyond the binary. I think it's hard to, like, the cat is already out of the bag, if you will, to say like a no AI policy when you say like, oh, well, can you use Grammarly? Can you like use the tool that comes with Lightroom to get rid of, to retouch your photos? So I think that's something we can come back to. And then there's some like obvious additional uses of large language models, like using AI for ideation or concept development, divergent thinking. So, helping to riff on copywriting, to come up with ideas, stuff like that, or to create images that are guide images for making composites or for other compositions. And then I think related to the assistive tech, there's like the AI as a summarizing synthesis tool. So I think it's an easy jump from saying like, okay, taking the speech to text, the captions of a Zoom class session, and the students will do this themselves. I don't have to do this. They'll like plug it in to something and like get the summaries, right, from ChatGPT or whatnot. I've used it myself even to prepare for a lecture. Like I just have tons of notes. I've taught this class for over a decade and it changes all the time. So sometimes I'll just feed that in to like give me a cheat sheet on my notes and stuff like that, or to recommend additional, say, resources and references, thinkers that I hadn't thought of before. There's also AI as chaos agent, and this is really just embracing experimentation and the glitches and kind of trying to break stuff, right? Rather than we know that it hallucinates, and so can we do assignments? Can we have discussions about when it messes up? And sometimes it's created some really unintentionally poetic things when it's mistranscribed things we've said in class, or all of the examples of the weird image generation stuff. And then finally, as it relates to the core curriculum of the program, there's AI as a teachable moment. So using this tool that's everywhere now as a starting point to talk about things like fact checking, about understanding systems, business models, power, all of that sort of stuff that relates to the topics that we talk about in the class. And then just to finalize what I'm going to say now, an example of an assignment that I give that we do in one of the full day workshops is a future scenarios workshop where the students choose some sort of trend or some sort of existing technology. I ask them to work in groups of 3 or 4 to create essentially a storyboard of what the world looks like 10 plus years, 10, 50 years in the future. And so some of them use large language models to help them develop the script, to develop ideas. They'll obviously use AI-based images as a starting point, maybe for their own composites and things like that. But the focus on the evaluation is like them having to present it, right? And so we focus on their presentation, the way that they tell the story based on these outputs that they're getting from AI, and getting feedback in the moment from that. The other context worth noting is it's a pass-fail master's program, so I don't really have to deal with the cheating part of things because they are presenting live in class and getting feedback. So that's my starting point. Looking forward to learning from the rest of you all.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Lishan. If you have any questions for Lishan, if you could kind of keep them on the back of your head, and then after the 4 panelists speak, we will be coming back to some of these points. But thank you so much, Lishan. I appreciate you. And next, we are going to go to Leslie.
Thanks. All right, so I'm going to speak about a course that I developed rather than an actual project. So if we rewind a few years, go back to when it was AI, generative AI was kind of becoming more accessible to most people, and specifically in our industry. Lots of varied opinions at my institution, I'm sure, like a lot of you. Some were extremely pro early adopters. This is the future. We want to use this for everything. This is going to change everything. This is going to revolutionize our workflow and our ideation process. And then others were of the opinion, this is going to destroy our industry. We're not going to have a job anymore. And then, so when people asked me my opinion, my response was typically, I don't know enough about, I need to learn more about it before I can, have an opinion. And so just in these conversations that kept coming up, I would say, I really wish I could speak to not just people in my industry, but experts in computer science, folks from other industries, how they think that it might affect their industry. And those conversations kind of resulted in this course. I was having that conversation with an associate dean, and she said, well, why don't you create that course? And I said, well, I'm not qualified to teach that. And she said, I think you are. And so, there were a lot of kind of bureaucratic hoops to jump through, but we did it. And I was able to co-teach a special topics class. So it was just taught for 1 semester. It's not going to be, a course that students can take every semester, but it was an undergraduate special topics course, and it looked at AI through the lenses of graphic design, art history, and philosophy. So I was really lucky to work with 2 collaborators, a philosophy professor who is extremely knowledgeable about AI, and then also he was able to speak to and lecture about the philosophy of creativity, and philosophy of art. And then our art historian also brought a really, really interesting perspective of, looking back in history, looking at the masters. Like when you're learning to draw, often you'll create master copies first. And so this idea, we looked at this idea of copying or using reference materials without the permission of the original artist. And going into this course, my goal was not to present a position on AI, was not to go in and convince the students that it was going to be our savior or it was going to be our downfall. The goal of all three of the instructors was the same, and that was just to present the facts as we knew them, and then to ask questions. Every course, ask a different question so that the students could kind of form their own opinions. And so the modality that we chose was typically there would be a few lecture days. We might have an art history lecture, we might have a philosophy lecture, and then we would have lab days. And on those lab days, the students would go into computer labs and we would experiment with a different generative image application. So we used Midjourney, Dolly, Photoshop, and then we kind of did a free for all at the end, and they could, you know, any kind of like free application online we played around with. And then after those lab days, we would have, and I would give an assignment that was crafted kind of not to get really aesthetically pleasing output, but rather to make them think about this technology that they're engaging with. And then immediately following a lab day, we would have a discussion day. So I used Miro, which if you're not familiar with it, is just an interactive whiteboard application. All the students would put screenshots of their solution to the problem I gave them on the Miro board, and I would just zoom around the board and we would discuss for a full class period. I have an example of that I can show you guys. But it resulted in some really lively debates and discussions, which we were really happy with because, you know, you're doing kind of an experimental course like this. You never know how it's going to go, if it's going to fall flat, if it's going to be a hit. And so our greatest fear was we're just going to be met with like dead silence. But the students got mostly really into it, were really excited about it. And we had a great course. It was, like I said, undergraduate students. We opened it up to everyone in the university. So it wasn't just art, philosophy, and art history students. We had science majors, business majors. So a really diverse group of students who they wouldn't normally get to interact with. So having that range of perspectives was also, I think, really crucial to the success of the course. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen really quickly and show you an example of one of our Miro boards. So we had 40-something students in the course. And for this assignment, the goal, so this was after the art history lecture about imitation. So the kind of title of the lecture was Emulation versus Imitation. And so the assignment I gave during our lab day was use Midjourney to create an image that looks like it was painted by the Renaissance painter Raphael, but it has to depict a human performing like a modern day task. So, for example, and then they had to share their prompt with everyone. So this person did someone drinking out of a pink Stanley cup. There were some really funny ones in here, and kind of like playing around with these assignments like this, I think also helped encourage dialogue between the students because it was fun and we're having fun with it. This was someone hitting a vape. Oh, this one was great. This one was getting eyelash extensions, playing a card game. There were some really, really funny ones on here, some really good ones. And then our art history professor added some actual images of Raphael paintings. And then, so we had lots of different discussion topics, but one of the things were, how closely is it actually getting? So we're looking at the prompts, and a lot of them, they're putting in the style of Raphael, or they're putting in tokens like high Renaissance painting. How closely is it actually getting? Yeah, and so we wanted them to understand not just how do I make this image, but how does what I put in affect what comes out? And then how good is the output? And we also talked about, what is good? We had a whole module on taste. So like, who is the arbiter of taste? And yeah, it was just a really, really thought-provoking semester. And I was really lucky to work with some great collaborators and a great group of students. So it was, I learned just as much, if not more, than the students did. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. Those are awesome. And the fact that it generated a Ninja Turtle just
right
from the prompts. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Sana, we'll go to you.
All right, I'll share my screen. Also, just a heads up, my internet is a little choppy. So Victor, if I freeze, just let me know. Let's see. Okay, so for those who just joined, I'm Sana Khan Hussaini. I'm an assistant professor of visual communication design at San Francisco State University. And this short presentation draws insights from an upper division undergraduate course called Research in Writing and Design. And given SF State's unique, diverse student body, it was essential to blend like writing conventions with design knowledge. And I incorporated elements from SF State's composition for a multilingual students program so that to ensure that the students from various cultural and linguistic backgrounds can thrive. So therefore, this course covers 4 main types of writing styles and their integration into design practice with a focus on social justice, which includes descriptive, expository, persuasive, and narrative. Descriptive writing is used for personas, expository for research reports, persuasive for posters, and narrative for case studies. So last semester, I was inspired by the TPAC, or Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge framework developed by Mishra and Goyler for the integration of technology in the classroom, and I explicitly integrated AI into my curriculum. I wanted my students to engage with generative AI and be transparent about its use. With this goal in mind, I adapted ANETWI's generative AI classroom policy, allowing students to use AI within specific contexts of the assignments. So ANETWI is an associate professor of English and director of the composition program at University of Pittsburgh, and their resources are available online for educators to adapt and use. Additionally, I also shared university-wide approved AI tools, resources, and tutorials with the students on my LMS. This included Quillbot, ChatGPT, Cursor, and Bard, which is now the Gemini. So as I integrated AI, I had a couple of assumptions about the AI usage by the design students. First was digital literacy. I assumed that my students possess foundational digital literacy skills that would enable them to navigate and utilize AI tools effectively. Engagement. I assumed that the students would take the initiative to explore AI tools independently, seek out relevant resources, and adapt their learning strategies to incorporate new technologies into their design practice. Self-directed learning, I assume that students would be actively engaged in the learning process, demonstrating interest and enthusiasm for exploring this new AI tool and applying them to their design challenges, and also openness to innovation. So I assume that the students will be receptive to integrating AI technologies into their design workflows. This includes embracing the potential for AI to enhance creativity, efficiency, and problem solving in design. So the students were allowed to use AI particularly for 2 of their projects. One was a design research report and the other was a campaign. Here you see an example of the research report that the student worked on, focusing on the Bay Area housing crisis. This particular student began their process by conducting surveys within the SFSU community to gauge the community's awareness of and experiences with the housing crisis. It's a big issue here in the Bay Area. The students consulted campus resources and conducted expert interviews as well to gain a deeper understanding of the issue. And in addition to engaging with the campus community, the students also ventured out to explore local organizations advocating for affordable housing. While students conducted their own research, they did use ChatGPT to develop a script for their survey and to edit their writing. Building off on their research report assignment, students are assigned to design a persuasive poster campaign, addressing or highlighting any insights that they uncovered through their research. So here you see some of the posters that the students developed on different social justice issues that they were passionate about, using Adobe Express and Adobe Firefly, as well as Photoshop and Illustrator's generative tools. Here's one example of a student who worked on a campaign for Beyond Meat, promoting a more plant-based diet. The students also submit their acknowledgement of the use of AI, either visually or a written paper. However, during critiques, one interesting thing came up. The student did not notice that the cow illustration actually had 5 legs instead of 4, and this led to the discussion about the limitations of the AI for the designers. Besides classroom discussions, students also reflect on the AI usage and their design process individually. So for example, a non-native English-speaking student wrote that the content generation through AI has improved their writing and has taught them how to properly phrase ideas in a paper. Another student wrote that they find it frustrating to generate images using Firefly since the prompts do not generate their vision, and they end up using non-AI Photoshop tools for image manipulation. So while I had these assumptions at the beginning of AI integration, through student reflections and class discussions, I discovered that some of my initial assumptions were actually incorrect. Firstly, students currently lack the digital literacy to use AI effectively. One student shared, I find that whenever I use Adobe Firefly to generate images from a prompt, it doesn't really convey what I want and feels emotionless. I have to adjust the prompt multiple times, but it still doesn't help. Moreover, the students were not enthusiastic about engaging with the AI tools, as one student quoted, like, an online creator named Bernie Burns said it best: the internet demands progress and hates change. AI is a symptom of progress. Whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. Students were also hesitant to explore AI tools independently and learn how to integrate them into their process. So one student wrote, the inevitable outcome of AI becoming less of a tool and more of a crutch for creatives. I already have this issue with math because I have a calculator and I grew up using one. I can barely do basic math myself despite years of education in the subject. So they perceived AI as a crutch rather than a tool that could facilitate their learning. And lastly, I observed that the students were less resistant to using AI for writing. However, when it came to their design process, they seriously considered the ethics and the authorship of their work. So these findings and outcomes of this research have several significant implications for design education and integration of AI into the classroom. So going forward and next semester as an educator, I do plan on encouraging active learning by incorporating more hands-on assignments, workshops, and tutorials to help students become more digitally literate with AI tools. And while the technology is still emerging, showcasing some successful examples of AI applications can inspire students and increase their engagement with these tools. I would also encourage students to explore AI independently. To facilitate this, I plan on providing a more curated list of resources and tutorials for design as well as for writing. Finally, it is like what we're doing right now. I think it's also important to foster such discussions and debates around ethical, social, and cultural implications of AI in design with our students, helping them to navigate and critically assess the impact of this technology. And that's what I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. And you didn't cut out at all. So
Okay.
it all came through perfectly. Thank you so much. And Tony, take it
Thank
away.
you. Sana, I want to point out though that that 5-legged cow, that's an important teaching moment, right? It's about the human in the loop, about having taste and aesthetic and putting responsibility back onto the creator. Even though this tool makes things easier, it's up to that creator to own it all the way throughout. So we find that that's like an ongoing theme where students are saying, well, this makes everything so easy. Well, yes, but that doesn't mean you need to speed up or not put in the effort and own it in the end. So it's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So I have, again, as I said before, my class that I teach is AI design. So it's finding different ways to incorporate AI into the design. But what I thought I'd like to show you all as educator to educator, a little tool for you all to use as educators to offset some of that. So I gave a workshop at Georgetown University a few weeks ago, and I taught the faculty there how to create their own GPT to represent their class. So I'm going to I'd like to show you, if that's all right, a 7-minute version of how that might work. Because I think that it's important that, as educators, we start to, again, be open to this being part of our world and understanding. I think Sana and Leslie and Lishan, all your students are using it. All of our students are using it in some way, or shape, or form. So let's just put it out there. Let's just say this is what's happening. So one idea that I would like to share with you all is creating a GPT for your class, for your particular class, so that you can offload some of those random questions that you get that were clearly written in the syllabus, that were already explained at the beginning of the class, that were already sent to you this summer. So wouldn't it be great if students could come and talk to your syllabus? Wouldn't it be great if also students could use your GPT to be able to argue a particular topic before they come to class the next day, right? So one thing we talk about when we think about is, oh, the students are going to use this to cheat, or they're going to use it to not do the work anymore. Well, maybe if your class is a critical thinking class, right? In this case, the example I'm going to show you is that, wouldn't it be great if the students formulated a little bit of an idea before they came to class, so that they've already had a round or two, and maybe their ideas have become more formulated, and now the discussion is that much richer. So I just wanted to show you some ways an easy way to kind of build out your own GPT. So this is one that I built as a demonstration for English 410, US culture in the Depression era. And the description is, use this GPT to engage in class. Drawing on a wide variety of source materials, this course examines the Depression era in myth and reality. It also considers why the period retains such a powerful hold on national memory in our era of economic uncertainty. I didn't write that. The professor, Brian Hockman, who developed this class, wrote that. But that was just so easy for me to take what he wrote and then to create this GPT. So anybody who has ChatGPT can build one of these if you have the 4 or 4 plus. And on the left side here, you have the panel, and then they have GPTs where you can explore GPTs, right? Or you can actually create one. So I'm going to go to create one, but I'm going to show you one that I already created. So let me show you the first step. So first, creating is, it comes and gives you 2 panels. On the left side, it has a panel with actually 2 tabs within it. And then on the right side is a preview of what you're building. If you choose the create function, it'll kind of lead you through it and ask you questions like, what's this about? What does your avatar look like? What do you want it to do? How do you want it to act? Or you can configure it yourself and drag and drop all that material. So I'm going to show you what I did with this particular GPT that I just created for the English 410 class. And I wonder if maybe this could be helpful for all of you. So I'm going to show you the back end of this one. I'm going to click Edit GPT. I'm going to show you the things that I use to configure this particular class. So again, the name, I stole an image from the syllabus and used it as the avatar. This is pretty easy stuff to do. The description is important so that the students know, and that anybody who's using this has an initial kind of level set about what we're trying to accomplish here. And then the instructions are talking directly to OpenAI, right? So you are a GPT that is not only an expert in the Depression era American literature, but also an expert in English 410 class taught by Brian Hockman, PhD at Georgetown University. You will be accessed by students to answer questions both functionally about the run of the class, the syllabus and grading, etc. Also, as an expert in tutor, you will engage in dialogue around their ideas. You will be helpful, encouraging, and challenging. You'll keep your answers short. By the way, always say that to your ChatGPT, or else it's just going to talk all day long. Always encourage dialogue. Always read the provided materials before answering a question. So what does that mean, provided materials? So actually, I took all of Brian's required materials that I could and turned them into PDFs and uploaded it to this. So these are all the materials. So this professor not only had the the books that they were supposed to read for me in PDF form. So I uploaded all those because they had 10 books they had to read, and they were going to discuss over the course of the semester, like, As I Lay Dying, and like all, all the themes that you needed in a Depression era literature review class. And then also there was actually a run of class that the professor had created for each of the class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are we going to talk about that day? What are the topics we're going to ask each other? And actually, if I should, I want to share something, my whole desktop for a second, because I just want to show you. Do you guys see the whole desktop now? Okay, good. I just want to show you what I had in here. So by class topics in each of these documents, Brian talks about what, and I don't do this much preparation for my class, so I'm really proud of Brian, but he wrote, not only what it is the students had to do for that previous homework, but what are some of the lecture topics he was going to speak about? What are some of the prompts and questions he was going to ask in that open discussion, ways to then, move the class along. So that information was very valuable to the GPT. So I uploaded that and just threw it in there. So now the GPT knows what Brian's trying to and what you're trying to do in terms of conversation starters as related to their class. Another tool that or another feature of these GPTs is to create proposed questions. So let me just go back to just this so you don't have to see yourselves. Is to propose some questions. So for example, you can write these and you can write a new one. When is office hours? That's a question that you probably don't want to hear them ask a million times over. Like, again, look at the syllabus. I wrote it all. But now maybe they might be interested in saying, well, I'll come to the GPT and ask it, right? So now that's a question that is pre-populated here. If I were to ask it, say, what are the underlying themes in Faulkner's As I Lay Dying? I add that as a leading question to get the students to read. And now this is a breakdown of the key themes in Faulkner's As I Lay Dying, but it's not the generic version of it. It's under the guise, or it's under the umbrella of the information that we provided here in the chat, in the GPT backend. So it understands that not only is it going to explain this particular topic to the student and encourage them to have a dialogue, but it also is under the thematic umbrella of what Brian, the professor, was trying to achieve. So I think this is really interesting. If you all can imagine your own experience, what are some of the materials or some of the things that you would want students to either approach off hours, or maybe to offload some of your emails of the obvious questions that they might ask. So I recommend all of you give it a try at some point to find a way to incorporate your own personal GPT, if only to facilitate conversation in class, right? To ask and pre-populate it with those questions that would encourage people to have a dialogue. And with the ChatGPT app, you can actually put it on the table and have it facilitate a conversation for the class, right? You can say, okay, considering the themes for this class, I want you to create a dialogue for us and ask probing questions that will allow us all to have a fruitful debate. And what's great is it'll listen, it'll stop, it'll pause, it'll actually evaluate what it's hearing before it goes on and asks the next question or facilitates dialogue. So that was my like 7 minutes spiel, but I encourage you all to think about that. I know that we're all talking in design terms, but I know that there's a lot of background information, and any of the classes that are critical thinking classes or dialogue related classes that have many materials, I suggest that you consider uploading and creating your own GPTs for your class.
Thanks so much, Tony. That's fascinating. I know that we sometimes see those T-shirts made for teachers that say it's in the syllabus that we're all supposed to wear because the students, and this is like a lot better, like asks the syllabus GPT. It's fascinating. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So those are the presentations, and I see already in the chat that there are a lot of questions. So if I could ask Natalie to help me facilitate, or to help me kind of like go through them so we can see them in order. But I have a couple questions that I wanted to kind of start while we are organizing those, and maybe we can start the conversations. But I'll start with Lishan. I'm fascinated with the idea, and this is kind of like exactly what I wanted to hear, like these new ways to incorporate AI into our classrooms that we might not necessarily be thinking of, whether it's in the syllabus or this idea of communicating with non-English speaking students using AI is something that I don't think was readily in my head. So I'm just curious as to how that process actually goes, if it's solely through the technology as things are being written, the assignments are being written, and if there's some sort of direction that you have to tell the students, and I guess this goes to everybody, that you have to train the students in order to be able to communicate back with you. So is Lishan still with us? I know that he had to.
Yeah, I'm back.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think on the accessibility front, all of that is student driven, right? Like some of the is just like requesting existing features like the speech to text stuff in Zoom. Grammarly was being offered by the university already, but all of that sort of stuff is like they showed me what they were doing. I think from a evaluation standpoint, I had mentioned talking about like how they have to kind of perform and present their own work, right? And so you can see the gap between, say, like the diction of something that they wrote with the help of ChatGPT versus like their comfort taking questions that are impromptu during a crit, right? And so that's something where you can kind of surface, well, like, okay, this is what the scripted version, and then how comfortable are you sort of unscripted when you're being asked about your work. I think that's a way to show them, you know, where they need to work on, say, language skills. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think you clicked on it. It's just like how much of direction do you have to give the students, and if they were how that process works. I think you kind of hit on him. I'm just fascinated by this idea of, just to let everybody know, this whole idea for this particular event came from a conversation that Lishan and I and another colleague of ours, Zay Steinfeld, were having about AI in the classroom and this idea of communicating. And another idea that we were talking about, we're always talking about the downfalls of AI, or how it's going to, be detrimental to us. But it's also like, I think either you, Lishan, or Zay brought up that somewhere there could be an artist or a creative mind that is paraplegic, for instance, and suddenly the AI is giving them the function to be able to bring in some of their creativity out to the canvas like they have. So I can't remember, was that you that said that, Lishan, or was that some? I can't remember exactly the details of the conversation.
I will add one more thing, which is like, it's not just about like the accessibility point. I think that's like the starting point. There's also ways that they've used it to, like one concrete example is a student who said like she needed to negotiate something with her landlord and she was comfortable communicating it in English, but there was like some nuances of like, how can she sound more assertive in the email, right? So there's stuff like that where they're getting help. So it's like, it's more than just like, okay, are you spelling this correctly? Is your grammar correct? But like that sort of advanced language learner stuff of like your tone and, how do you sound more professional in something like that? So that's interesting to see. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of that since, I'm working in my dominant language.
Right. That's fascinating. Thank you. Natalie, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, there were a couple. There's one that Elizabeth had, and I think it was about Tony, I think it was about the settings for your GPT. She says, are the settings to protect intellectual property? And Elizabeth, feel free to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so if there's no like further, yes, well, here's the thing. Midjourney took everybody's intellectual property and sucked it up long ago, and it's not coming back. It's all in the soup. So until some artists find a way to unionize the way the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and the Screenwriters Guilds did, we're going to continue to see issues with that. Tools like Adobe Firefly have been taught on only licensed material. Their training is, so when we're talking about corporate clients or using commercial work in terms of IP, I recommend using the Firefly model. Problem is, it's not as good as Midjourney because it hasn't seen as many instances. It hasn't been taught with as large of a group as large of a data set, as it were. When we're talking about what are we uploading, because I know there was another question from Omar about, you know, when we put stuff into, let's think, a GPT or something like that, I recommend all of you take a look at the settings, click on your face. There's a little data settings that you can toggle on and off that says improve the model for everyone. The OpenAI cleverly phrase it in such a way that it makes it seem altruistic, but really turn that off, because then anything you upload into GPT will not go back into the model. In fact, you can use it, feel confident using it safely in that way. So there's safety about what you're going to upload into there. There's ways to do that. And also we're talking about the ethics of IP. Some of these large language models or these image models were built without the artist in mind, or at least paying them, as it were. Does that answer the question? I hope.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Was there another one, Natalie?
And Kathy,
Yeah, go
yeah, I'm kind of going back in the queue to make sure.
Thank
If
you.
we forget anybody, feel free to pop in or unmute yourself. Kathy asks, what about when the GPT provides misinformation? I'm thinking about policy questions that get answered incorrectly. So is that something that you've ran across, Tony?
Yes, so this is a kind of a disclaimer you need to put in. If you're a teacher building one of these for your students, you're gonna say, listen, it's almost like having a TA, right? So you're gonna have a TA, and I showed you in the instructions there, you're gonna be helpful, you're not gonna give away the answers, make sure that the students know this, and this, always encourage dialogue. That's almost like training your own TA. You should also expect that TA is going to make some decisions or to say the wrong thing here and there. So that's kind of a level set that you need to make with the students that says, listen, we're going to be using this. This is a helpful tool, but we need to be critical about what's coming out. Now, when it comes to critical thinking in terms of interpretation of readings and writings, that's also up for interpretation as a human would be as well. So I think it's just being open and honest with the students that this is an imperfect tool, but nonetheless could be quite helpful if we all just keep that in mind as we use it. Wait, right, one more point on that. The more information you give it to react to, like all those PDFs I provided, vastly improve its ability to avoid hallucination, because it's been asked to focus on this reference material. If I were to ask it generally about Depression era writing without having provided all that information, it might then more likely hallucinate trying to give you an answer from the larger brain power that it has.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks. And I think there's some great conversation going on in the chat. I think we answered some of these questions organically. If folks have other questions for any of the panelists, feel free to unmute yourself or put that in the chat.
Or raise your hand and we can acknowledge you that way to make sure that everybody has the order that we have. While we're waiting for some questions, I do have a few more questions that we have for the panelists. I'm curious about, this one's for Leslie. I'm curious about the assignment that you had. I thought the assignment was really, really fun, and the fact that you're using Miro and you can see everybody's at the same time. I thought that was clever, especially for such a large class. I know in my large classes, critique of large classes is always an issue. So I thought that was a really good idea. And I'm wondering, the prompts that you said that they do their own prompts, right? If I understood you correctly.
Yes.
And do you have any direction as to how to create a successful prompt to them, or are they just kind of doing trial and error? And how much of a learning curve is that for the students?
Yeah, I would always do a demo before a lab day, and also give them reading. So I would create instructions, and I had a slide deck about prompt engineering and how it differs from model to model. And so, yeah, they had a little instruction beforehand, and then they had to, what you didn't see, they also had to write a reflection of their experience before the discussion, and discuss, how they used the instructions that they were given, what their experience with it was. So yeah, they did have additional instruction.
Perfect, thank you. And that kind of leads to my question to Sana, regarding, I thought the comment from your student regarding the calculator was very, very self-aware in a lot of ways, in the sense that, well, we already use a calculator. And it also kind of gives a glimpse that we always assume that the younger generation is going to be gung-ho for new tech, but that's not necessarily the case every time. So, and I guess this goes for both Leslie and Sana. What kind of feedback, or what kind of self-reflection are you hearing from these students as far as how they are working with the technology, and how they are, what their thoughts are about the tech?
Leslie, you want to go first, or?
You can go first.
Sure. Because I teach writing and design and kind of merge them in my course, but when design students enter the course, they still see writing and design as two distinct fields. And so the way that they use AI in addressing, or, working on the side, writing-based assignment or design-based assignment, their attitude towards AI is very different. If it's a writing assignment, they're designers, they identify as designers. So if it's a writing assignment, they just want to get it over with, they just want to meet the deadline, they'll be very excited about, okay, I'm just going to put it in my ChatGPT, it's going to spit out some words, and it's going to make me sound intellectual. Whereas with the design, because it's more visually driven, because there's going to be a critique, because it's kind of, they see it as an extension of their own self in a way, they're very possessive about using AI in their design process, like in terms of originality, in terms of, oh, I don't want to, it should be mine, coming from me. It should be, they're more territorial, I guess, about that, about design assignments. And that's what I'm trying to do, like bring in these conversations that AI is scary, but again, there are ways that you can use it to facilitate your design process rather than replacing it. And the calculator comment, it resonated with me as well, because I'm really bad at math. But that doesn't, and I keep telling them, but like that, just because AI is gonna help you with your design process does not mean that it's gonna take over some of the skills that you're gonna learn on the way. It does not. If you're going to use AI to, design something, you still need to know design principles. You still need to know your colors. You still need to know your typography. It's just, you're still learning. So these are ongoing conversations that I plan on bringing more in my class discussions, so that students can also ease into it rather than just, we're going to burn down the computer kind of attitude.
Yeah, I would say I had similar assumptions to what you talked about in the beginning of your presentation. I assumed going into teaching my course that pretty much every student in the class had used generative AI in some way, whether it be ChatGPT or generative image model or something like that. We did an anonymous poll at the beginning of the semester, and we asked a lot of questions, but the first one was, have you ever used ChatGPT? We did a big long list of different applications, and over half of the students said no. I mean, their names weren't tied to it. There was no, we stressed, like, this is literally just to give us a baseline of like where you guys are at. But yeah, over half said they had never engaged with it in any way. And then at the end of the semester, we did another anonymous poll, and one of the questions we asked was, how did this course affect your perspective in any way, or change your ideas or thoughts about AI? And a lot of the students said that coming into the class, they were really scared of it. It was this like futuristic monster. And then by the end, they're not scared of it anymore, because they understand what it is. They understand its limitations. So it's not scary anymore. And so that was a surprising answer that I got from a lot of the students in the course at the end.
Thank you both. Tony, that same kind of like change in perspective from students, do you see that in faculty as well from the ones that you work with?
Yes, absolutely. Well, yes, a lot of ostriches in the sand at first, for sure, when we work with faculty, right? This is going to change everything. I'm worried about plagiarism. That's all I can think about. And once they see that, you can tell, you know, if we're talking writing, you can tell when someone is just not writing with their own voice. And that's just something that that teachers need to engage with a little bit more closely. But once they get past that part and say, how can I use this to you know, to augment what they're learning, to create a tutor in between class, right? I mean, we saw an example from OpenAI when they're previewing this new model that came out 4.0 with Sana Khan from Khan Academy with his son. He had his son using the iPad. GPT was watching it and teaching him to find the, you know, the right angle or the hypotenuse of the triangle without telling him. And so it was augmenting that student's learning at home with a one-on-one tutor at scale that you could then bring back to the class the next day. So we're finding that teachers, as they find their own niche and their own way of using it and where not to use it, which is fine, establishing those boundaries as well, that there's more welcome attitude over the course.
It's awesome. Thank you. Natalie, do we have questions in the?
Yeah, I think maybe we've got time for one or two more. Molly had a question for LeSean.
Okay.
You mentioned assignments about when an AI messes up. She's curious about how those assignments are framed and the student outcomes for those assignments.
Yeah, I think it's something that's more like woven through other things. So a big thing that I like to repeat a lot is like just getting the students to document what they're doing. So like what prompts are they using? You know, if they're using generative AI to create images, like saving the ones that they don't use for the final assignment as well. And so there's a lot of emphasis placed on like showing that. You know, we see this in a different program. I teach a portfolio class, and so we also talk about like just like showing the things that you didn't choose, you know, the directions that you didn't choose or some of the process there. So that's the extent of it. But yeah, I think I would love to experiment more with like an assignment that's deliberately about like quote unquote breaking the AI or making it create five-legged cows or something.
Awesome. Thank you, LeSean. Any other chat questions, Natalie?
I don't think so. If I missed anybody, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you.
We have a couple minutes left, but I think it almost feels like maybe we should have a part 2 of this conversation and maybe for 2 hours, for a couple hours, because I think we're just kind of like cracking the egg a little bit. And I don't even know if that's a term, but you know, it's just like that the conversation just can go a little bit a lot deeper because this has all been fascinating. So, oh, Natalie, do you want to go ahead and say that to the group to go ahead and upload?
Yeah, I've posted some links in the chat. We have the AIGA DTR, the Design Teaching Resource, which is an initiative of Annabelle Gould, who's a former DEC steering committee member. It's a great repository for projects. We invite everyone to post projects on there. You can give as little or as much information about the assignment that you would like, but we're particularly in need of AI assignments. So I know Annabelle would love it if you all could post some of these assignments there. And she's also got a spreadsheet, a Google sheet of AI resources as well, if anyone wanted to contribute to that. And this is something that we share out publicly, that's shareable and collaborative. We also have a AI in the Classroom channel on our community facing Slack, where there's some discussions going on there as well.
Thank you, Natalie. And finally, the panelists, for those of us who want to integrate AI more into the classroom, do you have any resources that you can share that we can kind of like, that can help us along the way of things that we could do?
I have one. I follow Ethan Malik.
How do you-
MEETH. I'm going to put his name in the chat here. He's at Wharton School. And he's teaching not only he's using it in his teachings for his students in an innovation program, but he and his wife have also created a series of how to use AI in the classroom for teachers. That's not like a YouTube series. It's like 18 minutes long. So I also follow his Substack because he's kind of on the frontier of ways to think about how to use AI in the classroom and just in general. So that's my recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. And Sana put a link of class. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just shared the classroom policy that I was talking about during my presentation by Anne Winnett, about so they came up with different, depending on how you want to use AI in your classroom. You want to forbid it, you want to be transparent about it, you want to encourage it. So they've drafted some classroom policies around that. So I just shared the link if anyone's interested in adapting those policies in their own classroom.
Perfect. Thank you.
My recommendation is less like AI in the classroom specific and more big picture. I actually have it on my desk. I just finished reading this book, Assembling Tomorrow. It's by Scott Dorley and Carissa Carter from the Stanford D School. But there's a lot in there about like how to deal with what they call like runaway design, right? The rapidly accelerating technological change that's also pushing environmental change, social change, and all of that sort of stuff. And so I think it's a great way to look at the big picture. And there's a great chapter in there about like going back to thinking about materials and how do we treat AI and these other emerging technologies as materials that we really go deep into. So I think, it's great for the bigger picture of things.
And no specific resources for me, but just I would say don't make assumptions about what they know, or what their capabilities are, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leslie. So in the interest of time, to be respectful for everybody's time, we'll go ahead and wrap up there. But thank you so much for a fascinating panel. Again, I think, right, Natalie, I think we need to be doing a little bit more of these conversations. I think this AI conversation is fascinating. So I appreciate you guys spending your time with us,
Absolutely.
your afternoons with us. This video will be in our YouTube channel. I'm going to go and stop it now. Ready, set. Thank you.